Evening everybody, welcome to this evening's Cabinet meeting. The first item on the agenda as always is apology for absence, but looking around the room I think we're all here, which is great news. Declarations of interest, none. The minutes of the Cabinet meeting held on the 18th of October, are we happy with those?
Yeah.
Thank you. Just a short update from myself in regards to the ongoing threat to the overnight closure of our A&E at the Princess Royal Hospital. First of all, I want to say thank you to all those members of the public who attended our march the other Sunday. Over 3,000 people attended that fantastic community event. It was really good as well to see council leaders from right across the West Midlands either coming to speak at the event or offering their support on social media. And it was also good to see the community coming together and rallying behind the calls for the overnight closure to be scrapped. I also want to say a big thank you to all those people who have signed our petition. Over 30,000 people have signed the petition now, the biggest council organised petition in this council's history. It is a great shame, I think, that still, nearly a week on since special measures has been announced, that the government haven't intervened positively in terms of the overnight closure. And I've been speaking to some people at SATH, and there is clear evidence that special measures has had a detrimental impact on the recruitment of doctors and nurses at SATH. And it's important now at not the 11th hour, but I would suggest now going towards the final minutes, really, in terms of the ticking clock, in terms of the overnight closure, that this government does intervene and find the doctors. We heard from politicians in Telford Wrekin and across Shropshire that special measures would be the magic bullet. It would stop the overnight closure. It would give the hospital trust the money, resources that it needed in order to avoid this overnight closure. And my big frustration actually is that the community-backed council-led plan was really beginning to show great promise in terms of getting doctors to the trust. The hospital themselves were interviewing doctors all of the week leading up to the special measures announcement. And as I say, I'm not going to go into the details at the moment, but I will do at some point in the future. There is direct evidence to suggest that special measures has had a detrimental impact on the recruitment of new doctors to stop this overnight closure from happening. So I know the government are a little bit obsessed with themselves at the moment and who's in the government and who's out the government, but I do think the Health Secretary has to intervene. He's promised that he's going to monitor the situation. He's promised it's his top priority. We've had the Shadow Health Secretary come to Telford and has gone around the hospital. I'd hope that the Health Secretary himself comes to Telford and sees for himself the great pressures that A&E is under. I saw for myself patients in corridors when I went around the hospital the other day, and that is not something that I want to see for my own family or families who live in Telford Wrekin. And we know that if the overnight closure does happen, on average 80 children a month will be diverted to either Wolverhampton or Stoke. And I know from speaking to Roger Lawrence and members of Parliament in those two areas that their own hospitals cannot cope. It is a national health service, and we need a national solution to the problems here. Otherwise, I do really fear that people will be put at significant clinical risk. And it's really important that this government stops monitoring the situation, stops navel-gazing into its own political misfortunes, and begins to take direct action with regards to this. We also are going to be coming up to a key couple of weeks in regards to Future Fit. This council has made its position crystal clear with regards to Future Fit. I do think now, in order to get some unity across Telford Wrekin, across the county, we do need to see the halting of Future Fit in order for us to together collectively explain the issues that we have in this county and come to a solution that actually works for all communities, not just one part of the community. Just finally, I will be meeting, as I have done every single week for the last 6 weeks, I'll be meeting staff at the Princess Royal Hospital tomorrow with doctors and nurses to continue our DIY SOS campaign to bring forward some community, some houses for rent for junior doctors. Junior doctors are already booking themselves into that accommodation, which is fantastic news. I want to thank all those people who have supported it, all the parish and town councils that have put the finances in place. I know that a number of other parish and town councils will be considering that question in the coming weeks, and those organisations that have also supported us today as we've started the clean-up operation there. I know that, you know, for some people they're not in favour of that particular project, but I hope that people are honest. I hope there's nobody's people claiming they support the project in public only to be sending emails demanding people vote against such initiatives. So that's my update on the hospital. I will take some contributions from the opposition leaders.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that. I'll try and work through it in the same order that you've mentioned the issues, if I can. And one is the petition. I mean, the petition has been very good, the online petition. But I noticed that overall the signatures are 33,000, but it's only around about 24,000, I say only, it's still a large number, that have signed it from the two constituencies here in Telford and Wrekin. That's about 13% of the local population. Now, what I would say to local people is that you really do need to engage with this. And really, I would have expected that figure to be far, far higher than 24,000 locally. Now, if we can put out another plea, I know a leaflet's gone through every letterbox on this to do that, but it is still, what I really think is a low level. What we should be aiming for, of course, is 100,000, so we can get it debated, so on and so forth, but that clearly hasn't happened. Now, with the doctors signing, I was with Simon Wright, and I'll be quite open about this, when he told us confidentially that there were half a dozen doctors they'd agreed terms with, and they were due to sign contracts the following day. And that was told in confidence. And I was also with him when a post or a tweet or some social media came out from yourself saying that you expected that to be done. Can I say he was pretty apoplectic about that? And he was extremely worried that doctors wouldn't sign because of that release at that time. Now, if that's the case, and you did release that, that was a cavalier approach, and it was playing Russian roulette with our A&E service, because what you said may well have endangered doctors actually signing contracts on the following day. As to the health secretary, well, you know that he can't intervene. That was changed some years ago, of course. I think it was Landsley that put the changes in there. And you knew full well that intervention would be by the CQC, and it would be special measures. We made that clear to you at the last council meeting. You didn't refute it. You voted along with that, so that would seem to be pretty clear cut. Now, as for patients in corridors, no, it isn't good enough. And my view on this is quite simple. And it probably supports what you've said in the past and what you said at the last full council meeting, that the leadership of SATH is not good enough. It really is not good enough. And those at the head, and I'll include the Chief Executive Officer here, and also the Chairman of the SATH itself as well, need to look at themselves very hard on what they've done, how it's allowed to come to this point. Now, I'll deal with some of these points now, if you'll give me the time to do that.
Just very quickly, this is one item on a busy agenda.
Well, I can save it for full council. Well, I'm happy to do it.
You've got a motion at full council, haven't you?
We have indeed. So I'll do it then, deal with the issues around SATH and the failures of the board.
Thank
and
you.
We also need to look at the CQCs. As for Future Fit, I agree with you, and I think that should now be reopened. But if it does, I'd look for once, or at least this time round, if we can get it to that point, then we should try and do that together. But at least we should look at the alternatives and the options together, and not ignore a third option, as we presented, that we could look at copying roughly what they had in Cramlington. A lot of work went into that, a lot of professionals like that, and a lot of politicians in your own party in the county were very supportive of that as well.
Thank you, Brent.
Yeah, I can understand what Andrew is saying about the petition, and I would welcome many more people, particularly local people, to go online. In fact, one gentleman at the march said to me, "Well, look, I'm retired. I haven't got a computer, and it's an online petition. How can I do it?" I said, "Well, if you haven't got your kids, you can ask, and that they haven't. You can always go to your local library, and I'm sure they'd help you." And I think I would echo that. If the people feel they are a bit intimidated, which a lot of people are, with anything online, I'm sure they could always ask, and they'd be welcomed at our local libraries or any of our centres to come and do that. So I would echo that. But what I'm encouraged by, and I thank Andrew for that statistic, is if 9,000 odd of those people outside of our patch are trying to support us, to say you need to keep your A&E open, I think that's to be welcomed, actually. We would like more local people to sign up, but it's indicative of how many people actually feel so passionately about that. And maybe they know the knock-on effects for their own hospitals as well, so I welcome that. I don't want to knock too much the MPs, but my concern is that they may be able to do things behind closed doors that we can't see. And I welcome Lucy Allen's weekly thing in the Journal and other newspapers and what she's trying to do. But I think particularly Mark Pritchard and what Lucy maybe have got to appreciate is that the public, if they can't see what's going on behind closed doors, need to at least have a visibility of an MP supporting that in public with the public. So not just from outside, but being with us and sharing that, because people need to see that they have got that support publicly from those two MPs, which I'd love to see. It's something we really desperately need. What I can't get my head around is that in other organisations, if you had a shortage of staff who do common roles around the country, I know this is specialist roles, don't get me wrong, is why the health service haven't got some agencies they can tap into for either doctors or nurses. If they felt it was serious enough and said, you know what, as a temporary fix, you can, in any company you can have a temporary fix that can last from 3 days to 3 months to 3 years, can't you? To say, look, this service is desperately needed, there must be a flying squad of doctors we could tap into and say, look, can we borrow one here from there and bung them in? I mean, it doesn't sound beyond the wit of man to me. That's something like that couldn't be done, so that's something we can't do. Obviously the health service have to do that, but it's, what a birthday present, the closure of our A&E. So anything we can else do to support this, and particularly from the public, would be very much welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think absolutely, completely right about the petition. We'll continue to try and promote it. I'd encourage all councillors and all political parties to share on their social media and encourage their members to sign that petition. I think some members have been more active than others. I do think we just need to pause a little bit and to just think about what the petition's for. Well, the petition's for to get government to get a debate in Parliament. Well, 5 MPs in this county can secure a debate in Parliament very, very quickly on an adjournment debate, or they can raise all kinds of urgent questions. So I think that actually, for me, the petition should be in itself a demonstration of us coming together and supporting the hospital cause. But in order to just get a petition, a debate, is actually something that our MPs can do for us. And we are now many weeks into this crisis, and I do think, and I've seen MPs promising to get debates in Parliament, in interactions on social media, and they haven't yet. And I do think they need to hurry up and get on with it, so that the debates can be listened to and heard. I think that special measures and the way that was released to the public, and I think it's a very open secret at the moment, and again I won't go into the details of it now, but it will come out no doubt at some point about how the fact that special measures was going to come was leaked 24 hours ahead of when it ought to have been, has put doctors off, and there is direct evidence of that, and only time will tell. And I think, Bill, you're completely right. We're a National Health Service. 7 doctors is what it takes to prevent this from happening. We know that from commentary that the trust have secured doctors. So actually, the challenge is actually less than 7. It's less than 7, or maybe 2 or 3, and that will stop this overnight closure. And I do think that the NHS really do need to intervene. And the Health Secretary should intervene, and I'm afraid the facts don't support the suggestion that the government can't intervene, because they can. The Health Secretary's put the trust into special measures without a formal recommendation from the CQC, the first time that's ever happened. The letter came from the Health Secretary to confirm the intervention had been made. As our Shadow Health Secretary said, he would, if he was in government, he would bring NHSI and the civil servants in to sort this problem out. So it is surmountable. And I underline my point, that people said that special measures would be the answer. Well, we are now nearly a week after special measures has come in, and actually the only impact that we've seen so far is a negative impact. I do hope that we can work together. It was a great shame that our members of Parliament did not attend the march. I spoke to a number of Conservative voters as it happened at that march who were disappointed too. I do think we need to have a united front coming together to put a case to government. And I think we need to come together on a united front in regards to Future Fit as well. And I think that a third option, actually, from what I understand, is not clinically advantageous, and it certainly isn't affordable. But maybe we do need to talk about how we look at ways in which. Well, Andrew, you laugh, but I know you think you're an expert in everything. No. But I've spoken to the CCGs. I've read the assessments from SAF themselves. Yeah. And I've read the minister's own.
SAF haven't looked at it.
They have.
The CCGs have not looked at that option. No, they looked at a brand new hospital in the middle. They have not looked at it.
I think they might have. I think you might need to.
They lied, and it's unforgivable.
Well, that's a very serious allegation to make.
It's an allegation I'm quite happy to make.
That's a very serious allegation to make.
They lied.
But what I will say is we need to stop the bluster, and we need to come together and work together. And this government does need to take its fair share of accountability in regards to this. Arnold?
Yeah. March, 3,000 people or thereabouts. Excellent, well organised, well run. A lot of thanks go to not only the staff here but volunteers and so on. In fact, it's one of the biggest marches I've been on since the Thatcher years, I recall. 30,000 plus have signed the petition. That's more than all the responses across Telford and Wrekin, Shropshire and Powys on Future Fit. That shows the level of interest to me. And the fact that I didn't know the exact figure, but I thought it was around 10, but 9,000 from outside of our borough shows the concern that other areas have for the effect of closing our A&E overnight and other. And I'll just touch on that because I raised it at the CCG meeting the other day that it is, in my opinion, the duty of Telford and Wrekin CCG to work for the best interests of Telford and Wrekin population, and they do not. And I told them, and they didn't like it.
So I heard that.
Yes, I was told off. That's not the first time. I would also like to comment. It's not blowing our trumpet as such, but you know, my colleagues know that one of my favourite sayings is we've got to think outside the box. How can we, right? Providing houses for doctors to come in would not even have entered my head, right? That's thinking outside the box. Working with the university, the local university, to try and train up nurses into specialisms would not have entered my head, right? Going to the Indian High Commission, I know it wasn't exactly around the visas for the 10 doctors that want to come here that have been denied access by the government, right? But it was, again, working with others. And I think that shows how broadly people can think in trying to find ways to deal with this crisis. I'm not so sure about I understand special measures is not exactly what we would have expected, but I accept the point that special measures means people are recognising it isn't right, it isn't working. Something's got to be done, whether that's the right thing or not, I don't know, but it is a recognition that we've got big problems in our health provision in this area. What I would call for, and again we've been talking, and it works partly in other boroughs, a united front with the CCG, a local compact where we work together. I don't think we've got there yet. We want to get there, but we're not there yet. Whether you could actually have that united front with SAF, I'm not sure, because there are too many different interests. I mean, there's this thing now, they want to call it the county hospital in Shrewsbury, because it's the quaint old capital of Shropshire. So if they want to move everything there, well, the people are here, the deprivation is here, the need is here, the high infant mortality rate is here. That's why we have the Women and Children's Unit. So I think we're doing exactly the right thing in raising it, arguing, and I hope that across political boundaries, outside. I always think that these meetings are for the politics, but out there we work together, and I've always said that, and I hope we can continue to do that.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to move on then to the next item, which is item 5, which is our financial management report. Councillor Lee Carter.
Thank you, Leader. I'll be as brief as I can on this. The report in front of you sets out the anticipated net projected outturn position for this financial year, which is currently estimated to be within budget. At the start of the year, we set aside just over £5 million as a contingency, and the majority of that remains intact. However, we now enter a key period of the financial year where we anticipate further cost pressures, particularly in areas such as social care and road gritting, for instance. That's an outstanding performance as an organisation. It's the fruits of a strategy that was set in place in 2011 when Labour took back the administration, and we've had to have courage to see that strategy through against much opposition in almost every move that we've tried to make to offset the cuts from government, which total £117 million to date, with a further £25 to £30 million to find. In context, that means that the government effectively cuts £38,000 per day from this authority and continues to do so despite promises that austerity is over. Within that budget, we've still got cost pressures. The biggest one currently, as detailed in the report, is a cost within children's safeguarding. Adult social care still continues to be a cost pressure, and there's also cost pressures within the special educational needs budget. They're not unique to Telford and Wrekin, they are national issues, and they are national issues that still are not being addressed in the long term by a government that, as the leader said earlier, is if it wasn't distracted before, it is certainly distracted now. That pressure is being offset in a number of key areas, and again, this is testimony to the teams of staff who work tirelessly and creatively and in a determined way to make sure that things like benefits from our growth deal are better than expected, that we continue to see outstanding commercial performance across those areas where we sell services to others. And I would like to pay a tribute to all of those staff who continue with that task. As I say, this strategy has been in place now for since 2011, so for 7 years. And as we look around the country, and we don't have to look too far away over the border to our neighbouring authority, we just have to look there quickly to see what would have happened had we not put this strategy in place. We would have been talking about 4-day weeks. We would have been talking about fire and rehire of vast numbers of staff. We would have been talking about day-to-day spending freezes. We would have been talking Northamptonshire type scenarios, and I saw even Surrey yesterday, actually affluent Surrey, talking of a similar scenario in terms of their ongoing funding situations. I think that's probably all I've got to say for now. I'd like to move the recommendations 1, 2 and 3 in the report.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Seconded. Before I bring the Cabinet in, any comments from the opposition leaders? Councillor Tomlinson?
Yeah. I mean, I was hoping when I listened to the budget the other day, I mean, Theresa saying austerity's ended, and only for Philip Hammond to actually say, well, it's ending. Well, we don't know when it's going to end for us, because when you look at page 10 rather, it just shows you how precarious it all is. If it wasn't for the fact we benefited from lower interest rates, which I think lower interest rates, I'm no guru on these things, but I think Ken would also say they're coming to an end. You know, you see interest rates in America going up, and I don't see it happening in the UK. So the benefits we're getting in the past, lower interest rates, will go. That means we can't always come up with the rabbit out the hat every year with interest rates being lower and managing to have a couple of million to help support the budget. It's going to get tighter and tighter and tougher. And you look at children's safeguarding, it's 2.8 million overspent. Would any of us argue against that? You wouldn't. Okay, we might be able to get cute in the future how we purchase some of these, but we've always said that, and it's always been a challenge. And with all the issues that we've got on locally, trying to tackle various issues, we need that money to help support as much as we can. If it wasn't for the 700,000, in adult social care would be overspent. And so it strikes me that maybe not next year, possibly, but in years to come, 20 to 30 million pounds to find still from what we're currently spending now, without trying to put pressure on adult or children's social services, and the fact that year on year children's services money still seems to grow, it doesn't seem to shrink. We're having to spend more. Adult social services, I mean, it was one good thing, but is it a good thing? We managed to find that we're $500,000 better off because we managed to get more from clients. Those clients themselves, some of them will be possibly a bit hard pressed to find this money. It's not easy for them. So we're asking people to dip into their pocket more to pay for their own care, and I'm sure it's all statutory requirements, and I wouldn't knock what the authorities trying to do, but these are local people finding more money to pay for their own care. It can't go on. I know it's a corny phrase, enough's enough, but it really is. And we aren't the only authorities. This isn't Telford and Wrekin. This is every single authority up and down the country are all going through this frightening scenario of thinking, Gordon, Benny, how are we going to get through next year? Or maybe not for us, but how are we going to get through the year after that? Where's it going to come from? I welcome the government's extra money coming in, and what will come out in a full year for potholes and for adult social care, and maybe they'll wake up to children's social care as well. Goodness knows, we may not even have the same government in a year's time. Who knows? It's hard to tell. But these projected spending cuts, even though, and the public don't like it, the fact that we're growing the number of houses that we build here by 1,200 to 1,400, it gives us additional income temporarily to help towards these cuts, but it won't cover all these cuts. These are still got to be found. And now we're not going to be able to find cuts in children and adult social services. I'm now repeating myself, and forgive me for that, but it is still really concerning. I would love all politicians within this council and our MPs once and for all to say, do you know what? This is it now. Enough's enough. We cannot go on doing this anymore. Like they've had to do eventually with universal credit. Realising the sheer suffering they're putting people under, and have to bring the additional transitional things in, which I welcome, but this has got to shout at them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Andrew, anything from yourself?
I thought Bill wasn't going to mention the additional government grant.
I did.
And you did, on social care, which is a considerable amount of money, and of course on potholes as well. I'll come back to some comments I've made in the past, of course. There's 117 million been taken out, we're still here, we're still ongoing. And the question is, what the hell were we doing with 117 million pounds each year, next year, the year after, and so on, in the past? However, now it is tight, you're absolutely right, and things are reaching that point, and I agree with you absolutely. And that the government do need to ease some of the restrictions that we have. They need to alter the financing of local government. Certainly the business rates or the initiative there, which I think would have been quite useful, it would have been interesting to see that, has been put on the back burner because of other issues that you also referred to as well, Bill. And you said we might have a different government in 6 months. I mean, well, who knows?
I've no idea.
But you do have to ask yourselves in local government, and some of us have been here a long time, what on earth were we doing with 117 million pounds a year that we're not spending now? We could have been building utopia here in the borough, and it would have been very nice to have done it. However, I take your point. Things are getting tighter, and we are reaching that point. And I, for one, hope that what they've said about austerity coming to an end is right. But it has to be right, and it has to be right for the country, and you cannot magic money out of nowhere at all, Bill, as I'm sure as an accountant you'll well know.
I couldn't agree more.
Any comments or points from the Cabinet? Paul?
I welcome the report and want to thank officers for their hard work, continuous hard work on trying to balance the books as best we can. And I know that it's a real corporate effort to actually do that. Sitting in on the meetings on both adult social care and children's social care and on a monthly basis with officers, senior officers, and trying to sort that conundrum that we've got, which is how do we look after our most vulnerable people in our town, both adults and children, whilst dealing with the blanket approach this government has got to local government funding. I was with the LGA last week, and it's quite amazing really that this isn't an issue, as you've said, Bill. This isn't an issue for unitaries like Telford and Wrekin. It's an issue for every council in this country, and it won't be long before another council goes pop like Northamptonshire did. And interestingly, what happened with Northamptonshire was they turned them into two smaller unitary authorities, and that's quite interesting really, considering there are some in this place who would welcome a bigger unitary authority. I would suggest that we learn from those. We learn from those lessons.
Seriously.
We learn from those lessons from Northamptonshire, and we also learn from what's happening in Shropshire at the moment, because I can assure you that they're not having the conversations we're having about how we manage this situation. They're into crisis management, closing the offices on a Friday and sending a letter out to their staff to say you'll have to work from home. I'm sorry, but that is not good management of finances and management of an organisation. So any suggestion that it would be better for us to be in that situation is outrageous. Can I just say as well, we have other issues in the adult social care field, and the marketisation of those services is quite frightening. What's happened over many years, and what I would say is there's a danger to us as an organisation, and we have to be aware of it. That isn't the answer for adult social care and adult services, and we need to think differently, as we always have done in this council. Think differently about the way we provide those services in the future. I would welcome that to be a cross-party approach, certainly to dealing with those issues. Thank you, Lydia.
Thank you, Paul. Lee?
Yeah, just two responses to Councillor Eade. I think I'll welcome what he said on both fronts. It is tight, absolutely. I'm pleased that after 8 years you finally recognise that. Unfortunately, the Conservative government don't recognise that. The money for potholes is absolutely welcome. It's still not enough, by the way, to address the situation that we've got in Telford Wrekin or anywhere else. And isn't it a crying shame that as a country now, the Chancellor, as a short-term fix, dedicated more to fixing potholes than he did to educating children with special educational needs, or children's safeguarding as a whole. In fact, that's how short-term we've got ourselves. The second point I'd like to reverse on, really, it's probably a point where he raises the fact that what were we doing with £117 million extra, or what were you doing with it? Because actually in your time in office you've found £10 million of those savings. So I actually know the answer to the question, and I'll be explaining
Andrew,
what happened.
Nobody interrupted you. Please extend the same courtesy, please.
I'm just trying to help
No,
you, really.
Andrew, no. Seriously, you're the only person that keeps doing this. Stop.
Yeah, I know the answer to the question, and obviously as we come up to May we'll be explaining exactly what you did do with that £117 million. We'll also be explaining what you intend to do with the budget going forward. And this is a weird situation that we've got going on at the moment with the Conservative Party. They acknowledge that things are tight but never put pressure on the government to make things less tight, but then they'll complain about the little things in our town and suggest that we shouldn't spend money on things like culture, the arts, or even our environment, because that will solve the problems that were created by the government that they're refusing to put pressure on to address the situation in the first place. With interest, I read a leading member of the local Conservative association locally saying that we shouldn't spend money on daffodils, planting daffodils in the town. What a waste of money, and it could be helping us in so many other different ways. This is the bizarre situation we've got. But on the whole, I'm pleased that he recognises things are tight. And actually I'd urge him to put more pressure on his government, not just in terms of our budget, but our health service and everything else that the Conservative government is getting so horribly wrong.
Well said.
Thank you, Lee. It's been moved and seconded. I mean, I think you're right, Lee, in terms of potholes. As a borough, we send £90 million a year to the Treasury, and we're lucky to get £4 million back. And I think that in terms of the money that's been cut, I'm really proud of Telford Wrekin. I am really proud of Telford Wrekin. I'm sure we all are. Imagine what Telford Wrekin Council Borough could be like with additional money. Rather than managing decline of budgets, imagine what we could do. We could regenerate some of our neighbourhoods which are in real social need. We could help invest in further in the food bank because of austerity and universal credit, which means that people have to go to get food parcels. We could help children with special educational needs get to a decent school. Now, I know that people, there are certain types of people, you don't need to rely on council services, but go and speak to the disabled forum about what they have to cope with as a result in reductions. It doesn't touch everyone's life if you're in a privileged position, but if you're not and you rely on services like so many people in our borough do, then you are seeing the cuts and you're starting to see the impact. Kids walking to school with no shoes on, kids going to breakfast clubs because they can't afford food at home. Children in our borough having to raise money on sponsored walks to buy school books because school budgets are so tight. So talk to the people like that. Conservatives behind you, Andrew, look puzzled. But those are the things that happen in my ward and in other people's wards. People in Ivory Towers who are so disconnected with the real world might not think austerity's had a cost, but it's had a real human cost, and that human cost is being seen right across Telford Wrekin. So moved and seconded. All those in favour? That's everybody. Right, we'll move on to some good news. The local nature reserve in Lightmoor. Councillor Minor.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to introduce an excellent report that gives a continuation of the initiatives that we have taken with regards to our local nature reserves. At the recommendations, we're asking Cabinet for their support once more with regards to keeping Telford green, and at 5.2 the achievements that have taken place will continue, and if I could hand you over to my experts at the table who will answer anything that members wish to know in detail.
Mark, any headlines in terms of this report?
The Council places great importance on the protection of and the provision of access to the natural environment. The Council has made a commitment to identify, retain and protect locally important green spaces that are valued by the local community for both the wildlife they support, the opportunities they provide for leisure, recreation and the positive impacts they bring to health and well-being. Telford and Wrekin's designated site network currently includes 8 sites of special scientific interest, 47 local wildlife sites, 9 designated local nature reserves, 4 adopted and 4 proposed local nature reserves, along with 200 green guarantee sites, 52 ancient woodland sites and 25 local geological sites. The adoption of Lightmoor Local Nature Reserve will add to the 13 reserves already adopted by Cabinet, increasing the coverage of local nature reserves by 24 hectares to 477 hectares. The site has high nature conservation value and a high level of community interest and involvement. Lightmoor is owned by Telford and Wrekin Council and managed by Shropshire Wildlife Trust under a 25-year management agreement. An area of wet meadow is also leased to the Lightmoor New Community, who hold a 99-year lease. Members of the Lightmoor steering group and wider partners have played a key role in developing the designation proposal. The declaration of these adopted local nature reserves will result in approximately 2.8 hectares of local nature reserve per 1,000 of the population, which is nearly triple the minimum recommended standard.
Thank you, Mark. Any comments or questions?
I think it's wonderful. I really do. I mean, I'm fortunate to have the Dotto Local Nature Reserve. A good chunk of that falls in my ward in Shorebirch. And there's a number of things that spring from it. One is the number of people that will then suddenly volunteer in friends groups to support those nature reserves, and the free labour. It's not just the free labour that you get now doing all these jobs, it's the fact that they have got such imagination and work with the authority of the town council or the borough council on things that can be done that we possibly wouldn't even be thought of. They then work with Shropshire Wildlife Trust. It brings in so much more, and it's been a revelation to me just how much people will freely give of their time for such things as this. And I would also welcome the fact that as we get more of them, and I know that green spaces, guaranteed green spaces in Shorebirch, which I've offered up, no, nothing to offer up, but suggested rather that they could be added on to the Dottle Local Nature Reserve. Because I remember years and years ago, I'm getting old here now, I remember when David Bellamy, big beard, smashing chap, he came here and he said, what you've got to try and make sure you continue in your area is green corridors, wildlife corridors. And the more we can join these green spaces up and give wildlife those corridors to walk freely from one green space to another green space, even better. So if we can add either from neighbouring areas being adopted into another nature reserve that's currently there, because it doesn't cost as much legally to set it all up probably, then I would welcome that. The more we can do with these green spaces, the better. It's great.
Thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, I welcome these. I welcome nature reserves. I think they're very good, and it's the right thing for the local authority to do. I'll give you a challenge here. Why don't you include Station Road in Newport in that, where the local community fought tooth and nail to try and keep that as a green space, which of course this authority wants to build houses on, which are no longer needed there. But actually, after the inspector told you to take it out of the local plan, that he'd find the local plan sound. Now, if you want to challenge, if you want to do something meaningful, protect that piece of green space for people in Newport as an amenity for them in perpetuity.
That's the Station Road development you were going to sell when you were leading the council for a supermarket
It
development.
was the Station Road site you spent 1.4 million on fighting the local community, for which they've never quite forgotten. So now's your opportunity to atone for
I think
your
we've all
sins.
seen the email about when you wanted to sell that piece of land for a supermarket. Councillor Overton.
Yeah, well, as we know, people of this town value the green spaces we have in Telford Wrekin.
There was never a mention of a supermarket on that site at all.
Andrew,
that was your idea.
When you were speaking,
well,
everybody listened to you.
You have to tell the truth. You know, you're the leader of the council. You have to stop telling porkies.
When your deputy came, he conducted himself in a very reasonable
Nigel's
way.
a better guy than I am.
Yes, indeed.
But, I mean, your motto should be, why tell the truth when a lie will do, you know.
But Andrew, if you continue to interrupt, then please don't come again and send your deputy.
Yeah, Telford Wrekin is a green town, and people in Telford Wrekin enjoy the greenness of the town, and this administration since 2011 has done everything we can to keep this town green. We have a local plan in place now which shows where the areas are for development. We've had the 200 green guarantee sites. We've got 13, which will be 14 after tonight, of the local nature reserves, and 4 more to come. This is a green town. We want to protect our green town, and we will do all we can. And I say to people, the Conservatives out there, you know, you keep playing these games about it not being a green town. It is a green town. People love coming here. When we was in the town park, people love visiting our fantastic town park. We will continue to do all we can to make sure there's accessible green space for our residents, because it is an opportunity, a golden opportunity that people want to come to Telford Wrekin for, and we will do all we can to maintain it.
Brilliant. John?
I just don't understand the hypocrisy of what people want. Put the planning hat on, and the biggest complaint in the rural areas from all the villages when I was the chair of the board was that they had to leave their village, go to Madeley, go to Wellington, go to St George's, go across the borough to see their children and their grandchildren. And I used to reply to them and say, well, what do you expect? You won't, or you protest against a brick being laid in your village to provide the housing for your grandchildren and your children. And now we have an initiative here that is going to ensure the guarantees of keeping the borough green. That's wrong as well. You know, I mean they've got to make their minds up one way or the other what is going on, and the initiatives going on in Newport. I'm sure Mark can explain it. There is an individual, the canals. Yeah, you've had more in Newport than I could wave a stick at. Let's go to the Burton Borough School on the 106 gains, on the football recreations, the sporting hub from your people represent it. Eric represents it, and what do they want? You know, I mean, perhaps we should designate areas this must be built on. It's got to be built on. Telford's a growing town. When people turn up in white t-shirts from Muxton and they've got it emblazoned across the T-shirt, no more homes, and yet the very corridor of Muxton has been built with executive housing which one of Andrew's chaps live in. I mean, okay, he's quite entitled to live there, you know, but no more homes. What a disgraceful state. I think we understand each other, Andrew.
John, do you move the recommendation?
I'd move the recommendation.
I was going to say a big thank you to Councillor Raj Mehta for all the work that he's done in terms of this Lightmoor project, and also the work that BVT have done on that project together with Shropshire Wildlife Trust. I think if we are protecting more green spaces and creating more local nature reserves than any other council in the council's history, which is fantastic. And in terms of house building, I think if people looked quite closely about where they live themselves, it wasn't so long ago that those areas were fields as well. And I include myself in that too. Right, that's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour? That's everybody, and I call the meeting to an end.